This conference is brought to you by CodeStack, React and React Native development experts.
Hello everyone, today I'm going to talk about how you can leverage the native site in order to improve the performance, the readability and maintainability of your React Native app. Some of you might know that Airbnb tried to integrate React Native into their existing app, and Coinbase recently rewrote their app from a native app into a React Native app. Today I'm going to talk about another option where we actually started off with the React Native app and we moved some of it to the native site. So a bit about me. My name is Truls. I work for a company called Kron here in Norway, where we make investments available for everyone. A shameless little plug here, if that's something you're interested in. We are looking for React and React Native developers, so please reach out. Other than that, I've been using React Native since version 0.08, when upgrading to a new React Native version was actually a pain in the ass, and iOS was only supported. I've also built and maintained several React Native apps for a period of years. And the project I'm going to talk about today is a project called Shift that was started over 3 years ago. So before we dig deep into that, I just want to give you an overview of what this talk is going to be about. So I will start off giving you an introduction to Shift, the app, so you can get a better context of what the app is about when I'm going to show you the use cases of where we moved code from React Native to the native side. And then I will talk a bit about the motivation of why I wanted to have this talk in the first place. Then we will start off with the use cases, and then I will close off with some closing thoughts. So let's dig into it. So the elevator pitch for Shift is that it's a workout app that lets you shift between podcast and music. It all started over 3 years ago when my friend and I wanted to carve out more time for podcast in our daily life. So we figured that listening to podcasts while we work out is a good start, but really you can't really listen to podcasts when you are working out hard, but the rest times in between worked flawlessly. So what we did is that we built an app that plays music and podcast, and it's all controlled by a timer. So if you run interval for 4 minutes, it will play 4 minutes of music. When the 4 minutes is up, the app will automatically shift to podcast and then play podcast for your rest time. And then it will shift back to music when your rest time is up. So I guess that's enough talk. I want to give you just a short intro to the app as well, just to give you some visuals. It might be easier to understand what I'm talking about. So let's go. So this is the front page of the app. You have a podcast section and a music section. For music, you can either use Spotify or our own curated mixtapes. For podcast, it's basically just a normal podcast app where you have your queue. We have a set of Discover episodes, and you can also import podcast from other podcast apps. But the most important thing for this talk is the workout screen. So let's start a workout and jump right into that. So as you can see now, I've started working out and I'm in resting mode, and then I'm listening to podcast. So one thing, we have a couple of settings, and some of them are actually quite important for this talk. So remember them for later. We have setting where you can play beep when it's a given set of time left of your rest or work period, and we also have the same for speech. So now, I don't know if you saw it, but the timer just ran out and it automatically shifted to music, and now we're listening to Club Life by Tiesto. And another thing to remember for later is that we also have a notification that also shows the timer left and what is currently playing. So now the timer will run out again and it will automatically shift to podcast, and you can see that the notification is also updated. And we also have a feature where you can pause, or what we call it, freeze the workout, and you can unfreeze it. And these are features that I will break down later in the talk in the use case. So I guess that's enough of that. Let's dig back into the presentation. So the motivation for me to do this talk was that when we started thinking about moving stuff from React Native to the native side, there wasn't a lot of good resources out there. There are resources on how to create native UIs, integrate them into your React Native app. There are resources on how to create bridge, but we didn't find any good resources on why you should do it. And that's essentially why I would like to have this talk here today, to try to give you a tool in your toolbox that you can use if you also experience the same thing that we have experienced here. And I want to give a shout out here to my co-founder, Michael Gunnulfsen. This is what I'm going to present here today is a team effort that we have done all together. So let's dig into it. And before I start with the use case, it is important to know what the bridge is in React Native, because that's essentially the whole point. So in React Native, for you to communicate with the native side, you go back and forth over a bridge. So an example of that is that if you create a view and you, for instance, have a style, that will be passed over to the native side and rendered on the native side. And if you have inline styles, for instance, React Native need to serialize that and pass it over a bridge, which requires more of the bridge. So if you have tried to console log a property on your style sheet, you will see that it's a number, and that's for performance optimization. So the majority of the time, everything runs smoothly, just like a real life bridge. But you can occasionally get traffic jams, and that's essentially what I'm going to show you here today. So we have this concept of shifting, and one thing that I actually didn't show you, but you can also press on this button, and that will automatically shift to the other music source. And if that happens, then that is catched by the JavaScript side, and it goes over the bridge and pauses the podcast. Because how we play podcast, we're using a package called React Native Track Player on the native side, so we need to go over the bridge and pause the podcast. And that, in return, resolves a promise when the podcast is paused, and then that gets back to the JavaScript side. Then we can start playing music. And the music does the same. So for music, we are using a package called React Native Spotify to play Spotify. And for mixtapes, we are using a package we have built our own. And then the same process here, it returns a promise over a bridge when the play has started, and we can finally update the UI. So you can see here we are going a bit back and forth over a bridge. So it gets worse. So a lot of clients said that they don't want to click on this button in order to shift if they don't have put a timer here. So we implemented a way for them to do that, and that's with headphones. So with headphones, you can press play or pause, and it will automatically switch. And that means that we have set up headphones events on the native side, and we catch when the client press on play or pause, and that is emitted over the bridge, and then it starts the same process. And the same happens for the beep that I showed you, and also the Android notification. In order for us to actually communicate that you're going to play a beep, then we pass that back over the bridge in order to play the actual beep. And then now it starts to get a bit of calls over the bridge, but it's not much. It works perfectly. But what I'm going to show you next is our worst use case. But before we get there, I want to just give a bit of background on what it actually is. So I don't know how many of you have tried to run a background timer in React Native when the app is also in background. So it seems like at least it's 3,000 people here who have had this problem, or at least looked for a solution. And what Jose is mentioning here is that he tried to use a package called React Native Background Timer, which we also tried to use, but it had some bugs at the moment, and the same for us, unfortunately. So, but as a good Samaritan, as Jose is, he also answers his own question. And that's, he actually computes the value, computes the duration between two dates. So he takes the value, he takes the timestamp when the app does something and when it finished, and then he calculates how long the duration has been. And that's essentially what we do as well. But we have one more problem for us, and that's we have this timer loop, because we need to actually check every second what is going on, and we also need to update the UI every second. So every second we are emitting an event over a bridge to the JavaScript side, and we update the JavaScript side and update the UI. It checks the counter. If the counter is 0, it will automatically switch. And we also persist some data. Every 15 seconds, for instance, we are persisting the podcast position, so that when you close the app and open it again, you will start where you left off. And now, as you can see, we are sending an event over the bridge every second. And now that starts to bloat the bridge a little bit. So how did we solve this? So I recently stumbled upon this table on the React Native documentation, and this is quite important for in this talk as well, because as you can see here, React Native has listed out a couple of components and what they are in the native world. And that means that React Native is actually compiling your views into native code. And why that is important, that is because that's what we are going to do as well. We are going to create our own native views in order to solve this problem. So as you remember, this was where we were. We were meeting an event every second over a bridge, and maybe based on that, we will go even more over a bridge. So what we did is that we took the duration and the countdown timer and we moved those to the native side. And then we can get rid of all the calls going over the bridge. So essentially what it looks like then is that now we have a main counter, which is basically the same as the time loop from before. And then that emits an event to a counter UI, which is responsible for just displaying this and displaying this. And then we have something called a shift master, which is responsible for the notification that I showed you, playing a beep whenever the counter is at the threshold set by the user, playing speech, and also when the counter goes to 0, it will automatically switch. So you will also have control over which audio is playing and have a reference to all the players. So this is essentially the architecture we went for, and now we are not using the bridge at all. But another great thing that came out of this was actually that our code got much cleaner, and the readability was much better. So I'm going to show you an example of that. So I've heard that you might not see this, and so I'll try to just go through it briefly. But the whole thing is the freeze or the pause mode that I showed you earlier. And the thing is that when you press there and you start to freeze, we need to get the current timestamp and also do some calculation based on previous timestamps. and then when you unfreeze, it will use those timestamp and calculate what the current countdown is and what the duration is. And this was quite error prone, and you can see we also have some sort of reporting here that reports to Sentry for us. And this was really hard for us to debug because we had events coming on the bridge, over a bridge every second, and then it was very hard to reproduce that the events came in a certain order. So after we did this rewrite, this is essentially what the app looks like now. Now we just have a basic counter, which most people start off with when they learn how to program, the same as a to-do app, I guess. And it's just made our confidence in the code so much more. And this is just one of the examples of where our scalability and readability increased quite a lot. So I just want to emphasize some of the key points I think it's important for this talk before we finish. And I hope that if there's one thing that you will take away from this talk is that you will have another tool in your React Native tool belt when you are approaching problems. So this is the first time I've ever experienced a problem like this, and I don't think you will reach for this often, but it might be, and that's also as I said in the motivation part, is that why I want to have this talk in the first place, to just show that this is actually is possible. And we also did this change after 3 years of maintaining the app. So we knew the ins and outs of the app. We knew where we had problems of bugs and where things were hard to reason about the code, and also where things might feel a bit sloppy. And why do you think? And the reason why that is important is that when you start moving stuff from the native side, from React Native to the native side, you lose one of the biggest things of React Native, and that's learn once and write everywhere. Because now, essentially, we need to write every feature for all the platforms that we support. And so I don't think this is something you should reach for whenever you have a problem like it. You really need to think it through and make sure that this is something that you would like to maintain for the period of the app as well. But another important point for this is that our app did not perform poorly because going over a bridge as much as we did. Our app was chosen as App of the Day by Apple. We were monthly promoted in the App Store as well, and we were also invited to the Apple Entrepreneur Program. So I was very positive surprised how good React Native is when you're actually bloating the bridge as well, and how much the bridge actually can manage. So I'm not saying that. So I'm saying that this might not be something that you will do that often. And another thing is that often when I speak about the rewrite to other people, a lot of them are saying that this is not for them. They are not comfortable writing native code. They are comfortable in the React Native world, and I was the same as well. So I want to just share a couple of tips on how you can dip your toe into the native side. So how we started is that we took a small problem and we moved it to the native side, and over time we saw how that went, and then we just start moving more and more parts. And now each time I integrate a new React Native package into my app, I always go and look at the source code and see how they structure their bridge, how are they writing their code, and then I use that as an example of things I want to get more interested in, and I start to dig into that. And there's a lot of great resources out there on how to create native views for React Native and integrate them, create bridge, And there's also a great resources if you want to pick up Android or iOS development. And at least for me, going into the native side has made me an even better React Native developer, because now I have a better understanding of how the native platform works. So that's it. Thank you for listening all the way through. And if you have any questions for me, please reach out on Twitter. My handle is Truls. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.